IT Insights InsurTalk. Interviews with insurance leaders about what matters to the industry.
Welcome to another episode of IT Insights InsurTalk series by Future Processing. Today, we will be discussing the challenges that insurance leaders have to face when managing claims inflation, as it has a huge impact on the profitability as well as sustainability of insurance companies. My guest today is Manjit Rana, GM Insurance at Clearspeed, as well as a renowned thought leader in the insurance industry, especially focusing on innovation. So happy to have you here, Manjit.
Thank you. Absolute pleasure.
Before we move on to the topic of the discussion, I'd like to know a little bit more about your background, because I know that insurance wasn't the first thing you started doing career-wise in your life. Could you shed some light?
So I grew up wanting to be a fighter pilot. So from age of 5, that's all I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So when the Falklands War was on, I was actually in Biggin Hill going through my officer selection process. Long story short, I decided not to do that. Ended up setting up an Asian fashion business. Went to university, graduated, and then ended up working for an insurance broker software house. And that's how I ended up in the insurance space.
That's quite a story.
It's still the same dynamic, fast-moving industry. It's just not flying jets, it's in insurance.
That's crazy, really. But yeah, good to know, really, if anything happens in the world that we have you.
I don't think I'd be much good. I can fly a glider, but I can't fly a fighter jet.
Impressive enough, really. So looking at claims inflation, how would you describe or pinpoint the biggest challenges that the insurance industry have to face when managing them? Just, to start with the bigger picture, I guess.
Sure. I think claims inflation is quite a massive challenge for us as an industry right now for a number of reasons. And a lot of them are not in our control. So, whether you look at, the availability of parts for cars because they're becoming more sophisticated, or the cost of living rise that's impacting labor rates or material availability, all of that is having an impact. And then if you kind of go back to the cars one, because cars are getting more sophisticated, you can't really just send them off to a local body shop to be repaired. They now need to go back into typically main dealership. And main dealerships are always going to be a little bit more expensive than like mom and shop type body shops.
Yeah, I know something about this one.
Right, and I think those things we just have to try and find a way of managing. And there's lots and lots of knock-on effects as a result of those things as well. And as an industry, we now have to start thinking about these are factors we probably didn't take into account when we were calculating the premiums. And now all of a sudden we're spending a lot more than we would have expected to, and we have to now redress the balance, I guess. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's something I mentioned in the very beginning. It has huge impact on profitability.
Oh, massive. And again, I if you particularly look at motor, I think on average, companies were operating at kind of like 110% COR. So, for every £100 they're collecting in premium, they're spending 110. That's not sustainable.
Yeah,
clearly. So
clearly, yeah, definitely. You already mentioned a few of the insurance lines, but if we look at the bigger picture, what are the differences and the challenges depending on the lines?
I think it has an impact on virtually every line of business. To be fair, because a lot of the impacts are third-party impacts. So, the minute you look at the cost of labor rise, for instance, that impacts every line of business because you always need people to be able to fulfill the claim, provide the service to put the customer back to where they were. And that doesn't matter if they're vets, doesn't matter if they're airlines, it doesn't matter if they're building work, or if they're repairing your car. People are involved in all those processes, and that will have an impact. And then the cost of parts, and it doesn't matter if it's a car part or if it's a part for a particular type of, boiler in your house. The cost of those parts are going up. The cost of getting those parts from A to B is going up because transportation costs are increasing, fuel costs are increasing. So all of those will have an impact across virtually every line of business. So there are certain lines of business that are suffering more than others. Okay. But generally, I don't really think there's a particular area that's safe at the moment, or it's not being impacted.
Now that I listen to what you're saying, is it actually possible to foresee the growth of those costs that you mentioned in so many areas?
I'm not really sure we could have foreseen them. I don't think anybody foresaw the war in Ukraine. Yes. I don't think anybody anticipated that. Yeah. That's had a massive impact on supply chains, a massive impact on fuel and utility prices. So that was definitely an unknown impact. If you look at COVID, so all of a sudden we moved all of our people from working in big offices to working from home. That's had a massive impact. It's had a massive impact on consumer expectations, the speed at which we have to respond to stuff, our ability to be able to do things digitally and online, which we weren't expecting to do for a while. So a lot of those things, literally, we wouldn't have been able to forecast them, to be fair. But now they've happened, we have to adapt, Yeah. And to be fair, I think we do a pretty good job of adapting. But it has so many repercussions on consumer behavior. There's more people at home now. Because there's more people at home, do they think they're not going to get burgled because they're at home all day? So does that make people think, oh, well, if I'm at home all day, there's always somebody there, I'm not likely to get burgled. Do I really need to buy contents insurance because I'm not going to get broken into? But accidental damage in the home may go up because people are in the home longer. So there are so many scenarios that are really difficult to work through in advance. But I think we've done a good job of responding and reacting as those scenarios have come up. You'd argue not as fast as we could have done, but this is a big industry and it involves millions and millions of people, and it's hard to predict how people are going to react.
Yeah, I would even dare to say it involves almost everyone.
Yeah. Well, because insurance touches everything.
Exactly. Every
industry
of life.
Absolutely. So, trying to predict the implications on one area, and because we don't operate in isolation, so it's quite difficult.
One thing causes the effect on so many other aspects.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah. Yeah.
And when you look at technology possibilities, what is the role of technology actually in mitigating claims inflation?
Well, if you kind of think about what's actually happening in the industry, so labor costs are going up, so insurance companies' internal processing costs go up. We've lost a lot of people that are due to Brexit. They're moving back out of the UK, so we have a labor shortage as well. A lot of people retiring out of the industry, so we're not attracting new people into the industry at the same rate that we should be doing. So therefore, we don't really have the experience quite often. So we have to make more efficient use of the resources that we have. And the most valuable resources are the people. So you don't kind of want to have them doing jobs that technology could do more efficiently, cheaper, more effectively, without going off sick, without getting bored with that stuff. So that's where technology starts to add value, where you can start to automate processes and let technology do the stuff that's mundane, that needs less of the experience and the thinking side of it. So as a result of that, that's why you're seeing a lot of insurance companies on the claim side looking at automation tools, implementing automation tools.
AI.
AI is a classic one, but even if we don't go as far as AI, just the workflow automation adds massive value. because now I don't need a human looking at, has this person submitted a receipt? Well, automation software can check that. And do we need to check if the receipt is a genuine one? Well, automation software can do that. Yeah. But when we need to have a conversation with the consumer, with the claimant, we kind of really need an experienced person to be able to have that conversation. And I think it's also important that we're providing empathy back to the individual as well. I think it would be a tough...
Just, as human beings.
Yeah, and don't forget, most of the time, as long as they're not trying to defraud us, they've just gone through a bad experience and they've paid premium to protect them when they're in that situation. So we kind of owe it to them to make that experience as, it's not going to be pleasant, but as fair and reasonable and easy as possible. So we do need humans at that point, but all of the stuff around it to get to that point, it's probably more efficient to let the technology do it.
Definitely. And speaking of the technology further, how insurance leaders can actually foster this culture of innovation, as I would call it, within the organizations to make sure that they actually take advantage of the tech out there?
I think that's quite an interesting topic in its own right. So I think we've kind of gone through this model of what I call a petting zoo innovation model, where insurers buy ticket to go look at an elephant, a giraffe, whatever. So kind of put this into reality. So it's kind of like an insurance company saying, I want to know what an embedded in InsurTech looks like, and I want to know what a parametric InsurTech looks like. But once I bought the ticket to look at them 3 or 4 times, I kind of know what they look like now. So now that stuff's not really that interesting. And the other analogy I kind of use is kind of, like me as an innovation scout. I go to Toys R Us and I see everybody crowded around a talking doll. So I go, everybody else is interested in that. I must get that as well. So I grab it, I take it home. I know it sounds a little bit sexist, but I can. My son goes, "Hey, Dad, why have you brought me a talking doll?" I'm not interested. So that happens because quite often the innovation scouting bit is done in isolation from the business challenges. So I think one of the big problems we have, and one of the things that stops us innovating, is we don't start from the challenge side. So we really need to understand from every team leader what are their top 2 or 3 challenges, and then the innovation team really needs to then look at it and go, okay, what are our priorities? Because if we take a year to do that, by the time we start analyzing, if those problems are big and urgent enough, they would already have been solved. So now we're disconnected. So that's one problem. The second problem is we need to treat innovation like a service department within an organization. So it's kind of like, if you compare innovation to HR departments, HR teams do not run and manage your people. They support the manager with the right tools and everything else in place to help them manage. Innovation is run differently in most insurance companies, in that they get the nice sexy room with the bean bags and the digital big screens and stuff, and everybody kind of goes, it's not my job to innovate. That's what they do. But that's not the way people look at HR. So it needs to be a service area that supports innovation across the organization. And I think a lot of insurance companies are now starting to evolve into that kind of model. And I think that will start to have a much bigger impact on the way that we see innovation. I think we're kind of moving from the first generation model straight into venture building. My view is that's not a smart thing to do. I think we need to go to the innovation service model first, and then worry about the venture building stuff. But again, we can learn a lot from lots of other industries that have already been through this process several times. And we are getting better at this. We've traditionally not been good at looking outside of our own industry. And I think that also applies to technology as well. So your earlier question about how do we use technology? Well, let's look at what the car manufacturing industry is moving to and then think about how that's going to have an impact on us. Let's have a look at what's happening in healthcare and health tech and how that could have an impact on our industry. So I think it's about being more open, and part of that, again, if we bring in people from other industries, we bring in the fresh thinking, and we're not good at that. We need to get better at that. So it's not about the technology.
Yeah.
It's really about understanding the applications of it. It's understanding how that benefits our industry and where can we apply it. And we don't have a lot of people that are good at connecting those dots. But we need to get more people in to do that kind of stuff.
What you're saying, it really relates to other interviews I've done, or Future Processing has done with our guest. One is with Nick Sproul, because he also mentioned the silos is actually that the innovation is developed in separation of other areas, and it makes it just what you said, doesn't work that way, basically. I like what I hear, because I can see that more and more people actually look into a different path to implement innovation within an organization, a path that could actually make a change for a change.
And I think if you look at a lot of the industry conferences as well, we stick senior insurance industry people on stage and ask them to talk about innovation. If they genuinely were doing anything innovative, they're really not going to talk about it in front of all their competitors. Yes. And secondly, we're all in the same boat. Everybody's doing the same thing. We're not really going to learn an awful lot. We're not going to learn about game-changing stuff. Yes. And I don't get why we don't bring in innovators and thought leaders from other industries and have them on stage, because to be honest, that's way more valuable for us as a learning vehicle, listening to each other.
The ecosystem perspective, not like the role of insurance in them, but their role that they implement within insurance.
Yeah, and kind of flip it. Get Amazon on stage and say to them, hey, if you're an insurance company, well, now they're becoming an insurance company, but if you're an insurance company, what would your claims process look like? Because in theory, they should be coming at it from a completely different a different set of lenses than we're looking at it from. And as an industry, we're very not good, but we regularly will say, oh, but you can't do this because we've never done it that way, and you can't do this because there's all these reasons why you can't work that way. Whereas people from outside of the industry don't have those barriers, don't have those glass walls, and as a result of that, they may provide some quite interesting impacts. I mean, if you look at the Clearspeed stuff, that tech, had it been developed for insurance, would look very different. But because it came from a military background, they solved the problem in the military world and then realized, actually, there's a similar problem in insurance. So let's apply that technology over here. But again, it's because we're looking at it from what was the challenge they were solving outside of the industry, and then how do you reapply, as opposed to going, oh, let's see how do we solve a fraud problem? Because we're not really starting from the right place, I think. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect sense. It changes the perspective, simply speaking, if you come from a different background, which seems obvious, but apparently it's not always that obvious when you are there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And looking at the future of claims inflation, what would be your predictions for the next, 5 years? How will it evolve?
I think the same way that we really couldn't predict stuff that's happened, it's quite tricky. The one thing we do know is that change is going to happen. Other industries are suffering as much as we're suffering, and as a result of that, they are going to evolve. And as a result of them evolving, what impact will that have on our business? So I don't see enough of kind of the scenario playing type playbook type thing. So if you were the CEO of an insurance company, or you were head of if you were the head of innovation or the CEO of a car manufacturer, okay, what is going to happen in your world? People are going to stop buying cars in the future because nobody wants to spend 50, 60,000 pounds. So they're more likely to move to a subscription type model, assuming they still want a car. Now, we're not even talking driverless cars, but people want the flexibility. Do they want the same car for 3 years? Probably not, because when they have a young child, they need a particular type of car. When those children become toddlers or teenagers, you want a different type of car. At the weekend, I want a different car to what I want during the week. My car sits at the train station most days. Like, do I need a big fancy car just to drive 3 miles to the train station? Not really, but the weekend, I do want that. And so because those consumer needs are going to change, the way car manufacturers build and the business model around how they run their business is going to evolve. So if you just take that scenario of I'm going to have the ability to swap and change my car regularly, the traditional way of me buying insurance, go to price comparison sites, type in my details, get a price. Friday evening, I want to change from an X5 to a M4 convertible. I am not going to go through that process. And actually, I might turn up at the dealership and go, what have you got? I want to swap. At that point, I can't buy an annual policy. So it needs to be bundled inside a subscription type service. And are we, as an industry, are we preparing ourselves for that change in model? Car manufacturers have all of the data to be able to do journey by journey insurance. The car can calculate Manjits driving from Nottingham to London at this time on this route. They could calculate the risk and automatically add it on as if it was a journey-based premium. The human's not going to be able to do this, but the car has the technology to be able to do this. If that model is going to change, what do we as an insurer then need to be able to do? We have to price differently. We have to price in micro segments. Are we even geared up to do that? Does our claims and policy management system allow us to be able to do that? Because chances are it wasn't designed to do that. So that kind of thinking, it's not just about the claims inflation. It's about the way that we design products to make them relevant for the next generation.
And looking from the client's perspective.
Absolutely, basically. Yeah. And in terms of what most people don't really care. Most people don't look forward to buying insurance, but they do see the value in it. But generally, they're not thinking, okay, I'm going to go and buy a car. Let me see how much the insurance is. They buy the car and then try and work out what the insurance is going to cost. So I think it's hard to predict, but we probably do need to rethink the way that insurance products work and their relevance to the consumer going forward. Because at the moment, my view is we've kind of accelerated, but we're digitizing last year's pathways. So by that, I mean, we looked at our old process and we looked at, okay, we now need to do that, but in a digital way. And that's what we're doing. That's not innovating. That's not moving forward, but
the opposite, and actually catching up.
Yeah, we're catching up.
Yeah.
But we're solving a short-term problem. And I think moving forward, we need to kind of look at what other industry, because the other industries are going through the same problems we're going through. And you have to think about what are they likely to do? How is their business model going to evolve? What are their propositions going to change into? And then we have to look at how we fit into that new world and those new products. So I generally talk quite a lot about car insurance evolving into a journey by journey type product as opposed to an annual premium. So car manufacturers are moving from selling cars to moving to a subscription model. So where does that leave an insurance company where I might swap and change my car? I'm not even keeping my car for 3 years. I might move it once a week.
Your needs change over time.
Yeah, exactly. So how does the insurance fit inside of that? And if it's bundled in as part of an embedded insurance product or something, how does the consumer know who he's buying from? Or does that decision go away from the consumer and it becomes as part of my subscription model? In which case, as a consumer, do I even care who the insurer is anymore? So we talk about ecosystems. One thing is we could, as an insurer, you could be inside a mobility ecosystem, for argument's sake. So the car manufacturer will decide which insurer's product sits underneath that proposition. If I'm a major global insurer, I'm not sure I would want my future reliant on somebody making the decision, whether it's me or my insurance or somebody else's insurance. The alternative is for me to own the ecosystem. So you can flip it, and then I go, okay, so it's Allianz, AXA, Viva, mobility ecosystem, and actually we'll supply you the car and protect you as well. There's no reason why we can't know.
That's changing the perspective.
Yeah. So you kind of have to look at things through a different lens. We can't carry on doing what we're doing. We're making slightly minor increments in the product. And if you look at virtually every industry that's been disrupted, it's never disrupted from the inside. It's always disrupted from the outside, because somebody sees that world differently to the way the people within that world sees it. And that's a challenge. I don't think as an industry we're doing enough of that, looking at what the world in the future could look like, and therefore what do we want our products to change. We've been talking about prevention compared to cure for years, at least 15 years, as far as I can remember. We've been talking about, why do we worry about settling a claim when we should be talking about preventing the claim happening in the first place?
Exactly.
But I don't really see any progress. I don't really see anybody fundamentally changing anything. But ultimately, that's where we're going to end up. And so, and if we don't do that, somebody else is going to do it, and then we're going to have to play. Yeah, we're going to have to play to their rules, and they may not be insurance companies.
Yeah, and playing to someone else's rules is always more difficult. You're always behind.
Yeah.
So definitely better to be at the forefront.
Yeah, or very near the forefront, because as an industry, we're a very risk-aware industry. So we're not always going to be right at the leading edge, but we might want to be at the leading edge, which is a bit less dangerous than the bleeding edge.
That's a nice way to put it.
Yeah.
Manjit, thank you so much for all your insights, for your stories, all your background that you shared with us today. And thank you, our audience, for listening to yet another episode of IT Insights InsurTalk series by Future Processing. See you next time.
IT Insights talks on business and IT challenges with tech leaders. Visit us at itinsights.tech and dive into our podcasts, webinars, and events.